After my divorce, my ex-husband and his high-priced lawyers made sure I lost everything. No one wants a homeless woman. While I was searching through trash, a stranger approached me and asked, "Excuse me, are you Sophia Hartfield?" When I nodded, she smiled. "Your great-uncle in New York just passed away. He left you his mansion, his Ferrari, and his $47 million estate. But there's one condition." What she said next changed everything. Hook, first 10 seconds. Can you even imagine hitting rock bottom so hard that you're literally elbow deep in a dumpster, sifting through trash just to survive, only for a woman in a designer suit to appear out of nowhere and ask for you? I swear, just 3 months before that moment, my ex-husband's cruel words still echoed in my head. "Nobody's going to want a broke, homeless woman like you." And then, bam, my entire world, everything I thought I knew, flipped upside down. The story, there I was, Sophia Hartfield, 32 years old, holding a grimy vintage chair leg, my hands coated in filth. Nothing screams architectural genius like evaluating trash for resale value at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, right? I crawled out, wiping my hands on my already filthy jeans. "That's me," I said, a bitter laugh escaping. "If you're here to repo something, this chair leg is literally all I own." She smiled, a calm, professional smile. "My name is Victoria Chen. I'm an attorney, representing the estate of Theodore Hartfield." My heart stopped. Theodore. Uncle Theodore. The man who raised me after my parents died, who ignited my passion for architecture, but who'd cut me off 10 years ago when I chose marriage over my career. "Your great-uncle passed away 6 weeks ago," Victoria continued, completely oblivious to the earthquake happening inside me. "He left you his entire estate. You're not going to believe what happened next. Just 3 months prior, I was, well, middle class. I had a home, a husband, and an architecture degree I'd never used. Richard, my ex-husband, had made it crystal clear that my working was unnecessary. I make enough for both of us," he'd purr, making it sound romantic when really, it was just controlling. When I discovered his affair with his secretary, my world absolutely imploded. The divorce? Brutal. He had expensive lawyers, I had legal aid, and a whole lot of naive hope. He got the house, the cars, the savings. I got a single suitcase and the crushing reality of an ironclad prenup. His parting shot? "Good luck finding someone who will want damaged goods." So, yeah, dumpster diving for forgotten treasures, restoring them in a storage unit, and selling them online was my new reality. It wasn't glamorous, but damn it, it was mine. Victoria gestured toward a sleek black Mercedes. "Perhaps we could talk somewhere more comfortable?" I looked down at myself, genuinely mortified. I'm not exactly Mercedes ready. She just looked at me. "You're the sole heir to a $50 million estate," she said calmly, like she was talking about the weather. "The car can handle dust. $50 million. The number just didn't compute. I followed her in a daze. As we drove, Victoria handed me a folder. "Your uncle left you his Manhattan residence, his Ferrari collection, investment properties, and a controlling share of Hartfield Architecture. The firm is worth approximately $47 million. I stared at photos of the mansion, a masterpiece I'd only ever seen in Architectural Digest. "There must be a mistake," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "He disowned me 10 years ago." Victoria's expression softened. "Mr. Hartfield never removed you from his will. You were always his sole beneficiary. However, there is one condition." Of course there was. What condition? I braced myself. "You must take over as CEO of Hartfield Architecture within 30 days and maintain the position for at least 1 year. If you refuse or fail, everything goes to the American Institute of Architects." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. I haven't worked a single day as an architect. I graduated at 21, married at 22. My husband thought my education was a cute hobby. Victoria's voice was quiet. "Mr. Hartfield hoped you'd eventually return to architecture. This," she said, tapping the folder, "is his way of giving you that chance." The car stopped at a boutique hotel. "You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow we fly to New York to meet with the firm's board. You have 29 days to decide." I looked at the folder in my hands. Photos of the life I'd abandoned for a man who'd thrown me away. The life Uncle Theodore had always wanted for me. I'll do it, I heard myself say, the words firm, resolute. When do we leave? Victoria smiled. 8 a.m. Pack light. Everything you need will be waiting. I glanced at the single garbage bag in the trunk containing my entire worldly possessions. Trust me, I said, a wry smile finally touching my lips. Packing light won't be a problem. That hotel room was nicer than anywhere I'd lived in months. As I scrubbed the last of the dumpster grime from under my nails, I caught my reflection. Hollow cheeks, exhausted eyes, hair desperately needing attention. This was what Richard had reduced me to. I thought back to when I was 21 in my final year of architecture school. Richard had been 32, charming, successful. He'd walked into my gallery showing my sustainable community center design had just won first place. Uncle Theodore had been so proud. You're going to change the world, Sophia, he'd said, his eyes shining. Next year, you'll join my firm. We'll make history together. Richard overheard him. He introduced himself, showered me with compliments, asked me to dinner. 6 months later, we were engaged. 8 months, married. Uncle Theodore refused to come. You're making a mistake, he told me on the phone, his voice heavy with sadness. That man doesn't want a partner, Sophia. He wants a trophy. You're choosing to lock yourself in a cage. I'd been furious, young, stupidly in love. You're just jealous because I'm choosing my own path. He'd sighed. No. I'm heartbroken because you're throwing away everything you worked for. But you're an adult. It's your life to waste. We hadn't spoken again. Not when I sent Christmas cards. Not when I called on his 80th birthday. Not even when I needed him most. Richard had been controlling from the beginning. It started small. You don't need to apply for jobs, honey. Take time to settle into married life. Then he discouraged the licensing exam. Why stress yourself? When I tried freelancing from home, designing additions for neighbors, Richard would schedule last-minute trips, making it impossible to meet deadlines. Eventually, I stopped trying. My only rebellion? Continuing education. Online courses, architectural journals, lectures. When Richard traveled, I filled notebooks with designs I'd never build, projects I'd never pitch, dreams existing only on paper. He found them once. That's a cute hobby, he'd said dismissively, but focus on keeping the house nice. We're having the Johnsons over. I ordered room service that night, the first real meal in days. I searched for Hartfield architecture online. The website was elegant, showcasing museums, hotels, residences worldwide. Each one a Theodore Hartfield masterpiece. I found his biography, a photo from years ago, silver-haired, distinguished, standing proudly before the Seattle Museum of Modern Art. The caption noted he had no children. But I'd been like a daughter once. After my parents died when I was 15, Uncle Theodore took me in. He encouraged my interest in architecture, brought me to job sites, taught me to see buildings as living things. He paid for my education, believed in my talent. And I'd thrown it all away for a man who never even bothered to learn what my thesis was about. My phone buzzed. Victoria. Car picks you up at 8 a.m. Bring everything you own. You won't be coming back. I looked at my single garbage bag. 1 suitcase of clothes, my laptop, 17 notebooks filled with 10 years of designs. That was everything. I spent the night reviewing those notebooks. My early work was derivative, copying Uncle Theodore. But over the years, I'd found my own voice, sustainable design mixed with classical elements. Buildings both timeless and innovative. Richard's opinion didn't matter anymore. It never really had. At 8 a.m., I was in the lobby with my garbage bag and my head held high. Victoria was already in the car. Sleep well, she asked. Better than I have in months. So, what happens in New York? First, the Hartfield estate. Then, you'll meet the board at 2 p.m. They're expecting you to decline. Most have been positioning to acquire portions of the company. Why would they think I'd decline? Victoria smiled. Because you've never worked in the field. Most people would be intimidated. Good thing I'm not most people. I shot back, a fire I hadn't felt in years igniting within me. And for the record, I know plenty about architecture. I just never got to practice it. As we boarded a private plane, I kept thinking this had to be a dream. Yesterday, dumpster. Today, first class to Manhattan. Tomorrow, running a multi-million-dollar firm. The universe had one hell of a sense of humor. The Manhattan skyline appeared below as we descended. I'd never been here. Richard had hated cities, preferring quiet suburbs where he could control our environment. The car wound through streets I'd only seen in movies, then turned onto a tree-lined block. The Hartfield estate sat mid-block, a 5-story brownstone, both imposing and welcoming. Original Victorian facade with modern touches, solar panels disguised as roof tiles, smart glass windows, professionally maintained gardens. "Welcome home," Victoria said. Have you ever experienced a moment where your entire life pivoted on a single breath? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I'm still processing this feeling years later. A woman in her 60s stood at the door, smiling warmly. "Miss Hartfield, I'm Margaret. I was your uncle's housekeeper for 30 years. She paused. "I took care of you too after your parents passed. You probably don't remember me well." I did, vaguely. A kind woman who'd made sure I ate, who'd found me crying in Theodore's study. "Margaret," I said, hugging her tight. "Thank you for everything back then." "Welcome home, dear girl. Your uncle never stopped hoping you'd come back." The interior was breathtaking. Original crown molding mixed with clean, modern lines. Art on every wall, furniture both comfortable and museum quality. This wasn't just a house, it was a statement about what architecture could be. "Your uncle's suite is on the 4th floor, Margaret said, leading me upstairs. "But he had the 5th floor converted into a studio for you. He did it 8 years ago." I stopped dead. 8 years ago? But we weren't even speaking. Margaret's smile was sad. "Mr. Theodore never stopped believing you'd come home eventually. He said you were too talented to stay buried forever. He kept this space ready for when you found your way back." The 5th floor was a designer's dream. Wall-to-wall windows, massive drafting tables, an expensive computer setup, drawers filled with supplies. On one wall, a bulletin board with my college exhibition sketch still pinned to it. I touched it gently, tears blurring my vision. Uncle Theodore had kept it all these years. "He was very proud of you," Margaret said softly. "He told me once that your talent was wasted but not lost, that you'd find your way back eventually." Victoria appeared in the doorway. "The board meeting is in an hour. Would you like to change?" Margaret had clothing delivered. In the bedroom, I found a closet full of professional attire, quality power suits. I chose a navy blue that made me feel like the architect I'd never gotten to be. Downstairs, a man in his late 30s stood with Victoria. Tall, dark hair with hints of gray. Kind but assessing eyes. "Sophia Hartfield," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Jacob Sterling, senior partner at Hartfield Architecture. I worked with your uncle for 12 years. "The Jacob Sterling. You designed the Seattle Public Library expansion." I blurted out, a spark of genuine awe. His eyebrows rose. "You know my work." "I know everyone's work. I might not have practiced, but I never stopped studying. Your library expansion incorporated biophilic design principles. Most architects ignore it. It was brilliant." Something shifted in his expression. "Then you're not just Theodore's charity case." "Good. The board is going to test you immediately." "Jacob," Victoria warned. "No, he's right," I said, my voice steady. "They're expecting me to fail." Uncle Theodore knew that, too. Jacob smiled. "Theodore said you were brilliant, but beaten down. He said the woman who walked into that boardroom would tell us everything we needed to know about whether you'd survived intact." I thought about Richard, about dumpster diving, about Uncle Theodore maintaining a studio, hoping I'd use it someday. Then, let's not keep them waiting. The Hartfield Architecture offices occupied 3 midtown floors. Staff turned to stare as we entered. In the conference room, 8 people sat around a table, all looking at me like an unwelcome intruder. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria began, "this is Sophia Hartfield, Theodore Hartfield's great-niece, and incoming CEO of this firm. A man in his 50s, Mr. Carmichael, leaned back. With all due respect, Miss Hartfield has never worked a day in this industry. This decision shows Theodore wasn't thinking clearly. Actually, Mr. Carmichael, I said, my voice cutting through the tension, steady as a steel beam. My uncle was thinking perfectly clearly. He knew this firm needed fresh vision, not the same old guard clinging to past glory. I pulled out a notebook. This is a sustainable mixed-use development I designed 3 years ago. Rain gardens, green roofs, passive solar design. I have 16 more notebooks like this. 10 years of designs created in secret because my ex-husband thought architecture was a cute hobby. Carmichael flipped through it, his expression unchanged, but other board members leaned in. A woman spoke up. Even if your designs are good, running a firm requires business acumen, client relationships, project management. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Which is why I'll rely heavily on the existing team, particularly Jacob. I'm not here to pretend I know everything. I'm here to learn, to lead, and to honor my uncle's legacy while bringing new ideas. If you can't handle working for someone who wants to push forward instead of maintaining comfortable mediocrity, you're welcome to leave. Victoria pulled out contracts. Those who wish to stay will sign new agreements. Those who don't can collect severance. You have until the end of business today. As the meeting dispersed, Jacob approached. That was well played. You made enemies of half the board, but the half that matters respects you. Did I make an enemy of you? I asked, looking him squarely in the eye. Theodore told me a year ago that if anything happened, I should help you succeed. He said you'd been buried alive for too long, and when you broke through, you'd be unstoppable. I think he was right. I looked out at the Manhattan skyline, a faint smile playing on my lips. He usually was. Though his taste in board members could use some work, Carmichael looks like he eats kittens for breakfast. Jacob laughed, a genuine, warm sound. You're going to do just fine here. My first week was a crash course in everything I'd missed. Jacob became my shadow, walking me through projects, introducing clients, explaining office politics. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. Your uncle had a specific management style, Jacob explained in my new office. Theodore's space, cleaned but preserving his favorite pieces, a 1972 drafting table worn smooth, a leather chair smelling faintly of his cologne, architectural models of his famous buildings. Let me guess, I said. Terrifying, brilliant, impossible to please? Jacob chuckled. Close. He demanded excellence, but gave freedom to find your own path. He'd rather see spectacular failure than mediocre success. I understood that philosophy. Uncle Theodore had been the same when I was younger. My computer pinged. An email from Carmichael to all senior staff. Moving forward, all design decisions require board approval before client presentation. I looked at Jacob, my eyes narrowing. That's not how Uncle Theodore ran things. No. Theodore trusted his architects. Carmichael's trying to undermine you. I hit reply. This policy is rejected. Hartfield Architecture succeeded because we trusted our designers' expertise. Board approval is required only for projects exceeding $10 million, as outlined in the company charter. Send. Jacob's eyebrows rose. You just made him look foolish. Good. Richard spent 10 years making me second-guess every decision. I'm done letting men tell me I need permission. Carmichael responded within minutes, requesting a private meeting. I agreed, with Jacob present. When Carmichael entered, his expression was cold. Miss Hartfield, I'm trying to protect this company's reputation by circumventing protocol and undermining the CEO. Interesting strategy. I leaned back in Theodore's chair. Your uncle left me 30% of this company. I've been here 23 years. I'm not watching you destroy what we built. Let me be clear. My uncle left me controlling interest. You can work with me or against me, but if you choose against me, you'll lose. I suggest you spend the weekend thinking carefully about which path serves your interests. After he left, Jacob whistled. Where did that come from? I smiled, my hand shaking slightly, a mix of adrenaline and the realization that 3 months of eating garbage had taught me I'd rather fail on my own terms. Also, I've been binge-watching Succession. Learn some things. That evening, exploring the office alone, I found folders in Theodore's cabinets labeled with my name by year. My undergraduate work, articles about my wedding, photos at various marriage stages, my smile growing hollow. In the most recent folder, newspaper clippings about my divorce, court documents showing how badly I'd been screwed. Underneath, a letter in Theodore's handwriting, dated 2 months before he died. Sophia, if you're reading this, you finally came home. I'm sorry for being stubborn. I should have called 1,000 times, but I was hurt you'd chosen so poorly, and by the time I swallowed my pride, too much time had passed. I watched you diminish yourself year after year. I wanted to intervene, but Margaret convinced me you needed to find your own way out. She was right. You had to choose to leave. This company was always meant for you. From the moment you moved in at 15 and studied my blueprints, I knew you'd be my successor. Not because you're family, but because you're brilliant. Your studio contains something special in the bottom right filing cabinet drawer. Use them wisely. And Sophia, I'm proud of you. I was always proud, even when I was too stubborn to say it. At the estate, I found the filing cabinet. The drawer was locked, but a key was taped underneath. Inside were 17 leather portfolios, each labeled with a year. Theodore's early designs. His actual working sketches, not polished versions, but messy, real processes, failed attempts, revised ideas, notes about what worked and didn't. Each portfolio represented a year of his evolution. This was architectural history. The note in the most recent portfolio made me cry. These are my failures, my false starts, terrible ideas that became good ones. I'm giving you this because young architects need to see that even legends struggled. Use them to teach, to inspire, to remind yourself that brilliance isn't born fully formed. It's built one imperfect sketch at a time, just like you're building yourself back now. Love, T. By morning, I had an idea. When Jacob arrived, I was sketching frantically. What are you working on? A mentorship program. The Hartfield Fellowship. We'll bring in architecture students from diverse backgrounds. Show them these portfolios. Let them learn from Theodore's process. Real project experience, paid internships, actual involvement. Jacob studied my sketches. That's expensive and time-consuming. That's the point. We're not just building buildings. We're building the next generation. Theodore would have loved that. He would have. Jacob agreed softly. You're not trying to be Theodore. You're being exactly who he hoped you'd become. I looked up at him. Thank you for not treating me like I need to prove myself every second. You proved yourself day one. Everything since is just confirmation. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened it and froze. Congratulations on your inheritance. Guess you landed on your feet. We should talk. Richard. He'd found out through the Architectural Digest article about my appointment.
Typical.
I showed Jacob, who darkened. Want me to handle it? I looked at Richard's desperate attempt to worm back into my life now that I had money, and I felt nothing. Just distant pity. No, I said, deleting and blocking. He doesn't deserve any response. He's already disappearing from my story. And it was true. Richard was becoming irrelevant. A footnote in a much better story. The Anderson Project was my first major client presentation as CEO. A tech billionaire wanted a cutting-edge Seattle headquarters. Sustainable and statement-making, exactly what Hartfield architecture was known for. I'd spent 3 weeks on the design with our engineers. Green roof, rainwater collection, smart glass optimizing light and temperature. The building would be alive, responsive. Jacob called it exceptional. Theodore would be proud. The presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. At 9:45, I arrived to find my laptop missing. My models were there, but the computer with my presentation was gone. Looking for this? Carmichael stood in the doorway, holding my laptop. Found it in the break room. Someone must have moved it.
Right.
And I'm the Queen of England. But I didn't have time to argue. I opened the laptop and pulled up my presentation. It loaded normally, but connecting to the projector, my stomach dropped. The file was corrupted. Slides jumbled, images missing, renderings replaced with error messages. Everything okay? Jacob asked, entering with the clients. I had 30 seconds to decide. Panic, postpone, admit defeat, or do what Theodore would have done. Actually, I said, closing the laptop with a smile, let's do this differently. Mr. Anderson, you said you wanted a building that tells a story. Let me tell you that story. I moved to the whiteboard and started sketching, my hand moving with confidence built over 10 years of secret practice. I drew the building's silhouette, explained how the shape was inspired by the landscape, how every angle had purpose. Traditional architecture treats buildings as static objects, I said, sketching details, but your headquarters will be dynamic, alive. I drew arrows showing airflow, water collection, seasonal sun angles. In summer, the smart glass darkens automatically. In winter, it opens to maximize passive solar heating. Anderson leaned forward, his eyes bright. I kept drawing, kept talking, explaining every choice. Jacob handed me colored markers and I added depth, shadow, life. By the time I finished, 45 minutes later, the whiteboard was covered in a comprehensive representation of my vision. Raw, honest, clearly fueled by genuine passion. Anderson stood, examining the board. This is exactly what I wanted. Someone who understands buildings as living systems. When can you start? After they left, having agreed to terms immediately, I finally breathed. Jacob was grinning. That was extraordinary. Someone corrupted my files. This was sabotage. I know. Carmichael borrowed your laptop yesterday. Said he wanted to review timelines. It doesn't matter. He wanted me to fail. Instead, I showed everyone I don't need fancy presentations. The work speaks for itself. That evening, I called an emergency board meeting with Victoria as legal counsel. I want to address what happened this morning. My files were deliberately corrupted to undermine my credibility. Carmichael shifted uncomfortably. That's serious. It is. Which is why I had it traced. The modifications originated from your computer yesterday at 6:04 p.m. Silence. Carmichael's face reddened. I was reviewing files. If something was accidentally modified, there was nothing accidental about corrupting every backup, Jacob said coldly. I was testing her. Carmichael snapped. Theodore left this company to an untested amateur. I laughed. You wanted to see if I'd crumble, Mr. Carmichael? I spent 3 months living out of a storage unit. I dumpster dived for furniture to sell for food. You corrupting files doesn't even register. But sabotaging company interests to serve your ego makes you a liability. I stood. Here's what's happening. You'll resign immediately. In exchange, the company will buy out your 30% stake at fair market value, and you'll sign a non-disparagement agreement. Or I file formal complaints, which will involve lawyers and destroy your reputation. Your choice. You have until end of business tomorrow. After the meeting, Jacob found me at the window. You handled that perfectly. Did I? Part of me wanted to just fire him. But you gave him a way out that preserves dignity while removing the threat. That's better leadership. Theodore used to say, the mark of a good leader isn't celebrating success, but handling people who try to tear you down. I turned to face him. Jacob, why are you really helping me? You could have taken over this company. He was quiet for a moment. Theodore asked me to, yes, but I'm not doing this out of obligation. In 1 month, you've already started changing this place. The fellowship program, the way you talk to junior architects, how you treat buildings as living systems, you're bringing passion back. He stepped closer. And because I watched your improvised presentation, the way you drew, the way you spoke with your whole body, that's not someone faking it. That's someone who's been suffocating and finally learned to breathe. There was something in his voice that made my heart skip. This wasn't just professional respect. Jacob, I started, but he held up a hand. I'm not going to complicate things. You just got out of a terrible marriage. You're rebuilding. I just wanted you to know I see you. The real you. And she's remarkable. He left before I could respond. Carmichael resigned the next morning. The company bought out his shares, redistributing them among remaining board members and key employees. The biggest obstacle to my leadership was gone. But I had a feeling the real challenges were just beginning. 2 weeks after Carmichael's departure, Margaret found a leather-bound journal behind Theodore's architecture books. "Miss Hartfield, you should read this. Your uncle kept a diary. Many entries are about you." The journal covered 15 years, from when I first lived with him to weeks before his death. The entries about my marriage stopped me cold. March 15th, 10 years ago. Sophia married Richard Foster today. I refuse to attend. Margaret says I'm being stubborn and cruel. Maybe. But I can't watch someone I raised walk into a cage with her eyes open. I told her he was controlling. She chose him anyway. All I can do now is wait and hope she finds her way back. December 8th, 9 years ago. Heard through mutual acquaintances, Sophia isn't working. Richard won't let her. My brilliant girl is wasting away in suburban silence. I want to call. Margaret won't let me. She says Sophia has to realize this herself. That me interfering would make her defensive. I hate that she's right. July 22nd, 8 years ago. Started building the studio on the 5th floor today. Margaret thinks I'm foolish. Preparing a space for someone who might never come home. But I need to believe she will. The studio is my act of faith. April 8th, 5 years ago. Saw Sophia at a charity gala. Richard had his hand on her back the whole night, steering her. She looked thin, tired, her smile brittle. I wanted to say something, but she avoided my eyes. I don't think she's even aware anymore. The diminishing of herself. January 30th, 3 years ago. Heard Richard's having an affair. Everyone knows except Sophia. Part of me wants to tell her, but Margaret's right. She needs to discover it herself. Needs to be angry enough to leave. If I tell her, she might try to save the marriage out of pride. November 11th, 2 years ago. Reviewed my will today. Everything still goes to Sophia. Contingent on running the firm for at least a year. Jacob thinks I'm manipulative. Maybe. But this company was always meant for her. Since she was 15 and I found her sketching my buildings. She has the gift. She just needs to remember. September 4th, 1 year ago. Doctor says I have maybe 6 months. I've made peace with dying. What I can't make peace with is the possibility Sophia will spend her life in that prison of a marriage. All I can do is leave her the tools to rebuild when she's ready. December 20th, 6 months ago. Sophia filed for divorce. Thank God. This is her chance. The divorce will be brutal, but she's stronger than she knows. March 8th, 8 weeks ago. I'm dying faster than expected. Pain is considerable, but I'm content. Victoria has instructions to find Sophia after I'm gone. The rest is up to her. She'll either take the challenge or find her own path. Either way, she'll be free. That's all I ever wanted. Love always, Theodore. I sat in his study, tears streaming, feeling grief, gratitude, love for a man who'd prepared a studio 8 years before I needed it. Just in case. He loved you very much, Margaret said, her voice soft. Everything he did came from that love. He thought if he pushed too hard, you'd pull away, so he waited. And he prepared this place for you to come home to. I wasted so much time. No, you learned what you needed to learn. Theodore understood that. That night, I called Jacob. Can you come to the estate? I need to talk. He arrived within an hour. I handed him the journal. He read in silence. When he finished, he looked at me carefully. How are you feeling? Seen. Theodore understood me better than I understood myself. Jacob moved closer. For what it's worth, he was right. The Sophia who walked into that board meeting couldn't have existed without everything you went through. He paused. He mentioned you said you'd help me, that you'd understand what he was trying to do. I didn't know about the journal, but yes, he talked to me about you about a year before he died. Told me his brilliant niece was wasting her life, and when she finally escaped, she'd need someone who wouldn't try to control her. He made me promise I'd support you. Is that why you're being so nice? Obligation? It started that way, Jacob admitted. But Sophia, I stopped doing this for Theodore weeks ago. Now I'm doing it because every day I see you becoming more yourself. That's not obligation. That's admiration. He took my hand carefully. And if I'm completely honest, it's more than admiration. But you just got out of a terrible marriage. I'm not going to pressure you. I looked at our hands. What if I want to be ready? Jacob smiled. Then we'll figure it out together. At whatever pace you need. No pressure, no expectations. Just two architects building something new. We stood on Theodore's rooftop overlooking the city, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a decade. Hope. Not just for my career, but for my life. Theodore had given me back my belief in myself. He'd proven that sometimes the people who love us most have to step back and let us fall because that's the only way we learn we're strong enough to stand. The best inheritance isn't money or property. It's the gift of believing you're capable of extraordinary things. The Hartfield Fellowship launched 3 months after I took over. 300 applications for 12 spots. Jacob and I spent weeks reviewing portfolios. This one, I said, pointing to Emma Rodriguez. She's designing homeless shelters that incorporate community gardens. She sees architecture as social change. Jacob studied it. She's young, only 22. No experience. Neither did I when Theodore believed in me. That's the point. The fellows arrived in September, nervous, but buzzing. I gathered them in the studio. Your presence isn't charity, it's investment. Theodore Hartfield believed great architecture comes from diverse perspectives. You'll work on real projects alongside our architects. Your ideas will be heard, challenged, sometimes implemented. Welcome to Hartfield Architecture. Emma approached afterward, her hands shaking. Miss Hartfield, thank you. My family didn't understand why I wanted to study architecture. I smiled gently. Let me guess. They said it was a nice hobby but not a real career? Exactly. Because people who don't understand passion will always try to diminish it. My ex-husband spent 10 years telling me my degree was a cute waste of time. Don't let anyone make you small for dreaming big. The program was demanding. Fellows worked 40 hours weekly on firm projects while completing designs under mentorship. Some senior architects complained, but most embraced it. By November, Emma's community shelter design attracted attention from a nonprofit building in Brooklyn. They wanted Hartfield to lead, with Emma as primary designer under supervision. This is too much responsibility, Emma worried. You're an architect. Act like one. The project became Emma's proving ground. The critics questioned whether we were exploiting young talent. I addressed it in an Architectural Digest interview. The Hartfield Fellowship isn't about cheap labor. It's about dismantling barriers that keep talented people out of architecture. Emma comes from a working-class family. She couldn't afford unpaid internships. Programs like ours ensure talent, not privilege, determine success. The article ran with photos of our fellows. Within a week, 3 other firms announced similar programs. You're changing the industry, Jacob said one evening. I'm doing what Theodore taught me, though I'm sure he'd have some sarcastic comment about it taking me 10 years to figure that out. Jacob had become more than my business partner. We'd fallen into an easy rhythm, working late, grabbing dinner, talking about everything. The attraction was undeniable, but we'd kept things professional until the company holiday party in December. I'd spent the day at the Brooklyn site with Emma, watching her explain her design to construction crews with newfound confidence. By the time I reached the party, I was late, windblown, and genuinely happy. Jacob found me near the bar, his tie loosened. You missed the speeches. Let me guess. Everyone thanked everyone. Someone made an awkward joke, and Melissa from accounting got drunk too early. He laughed. Exactly that order. The DJ started playing something slow. Jacob extended his hand. Dance with me. I hesitated. This felt like crossing a line. But then I looked at his face and thought about Theodore's journal, about building something new. One dance. He pulled me close. We swayed to the music, not talking, just being. Sophia, he said softly, his voice a low rumble against my ear. I know we agreed to keep things professional. We did. And I know you're still healing. I am. But I need you to know something. I'm in love with you. Not falling, but completely, irrevocably in love. I'll wait as long as you need, or step back entirely. But I couldn't go another day without telling you. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to panic, but a bigger part, the part that had learned to take bold risks, wanted to jump. I'm terrified. Richard made me doubt everything. What if I'm not ready? What if I mess this up? Then we'll figure out together. I'm not Richard. I don't want to control you. I love who you are right now. The brilliant architect who improvises presentations and starts fellowship programs. That's not someone who needs changing. I kissed him then, there on the dance floor in front of half the company. Impulsive. Probably complicated. But right. When we pulled apart, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped, and suddenly everyone was applauding. I buried my face in Jacob's shoulder, laughing. Well, he said, grinning, so much for professional. Theodore said the best architecture comes from bold risks. Guess that applies to life, too. The relationship with Jacob changed everything and nothing. At work, we were still CEO and senior partner. After hours, we were just Sophia and Jacob learning each other. He was patient with my hesitations, never pushing, always there when I needed grounding. Unlike Richard, who needed me small, Jacob seemed to grow alongside me. Tell me about your marriage, he asked one night in January, a month after we'd made things official. Snow was falling outside. I tensed. Why? Because I can see you waiting for me to become him. Every time you accomplish something, you brace yourself. I want to understand what he did, so I never accidentally echo it. I never talked about details with anyone, but Jacob's face held only concern. He made me feel like everything about me was too much or not enough. My degree was cute, but impractical. My ideas were hobbyist nonsense. When I got excited about architecture, he'd call it obsessive. When I was quiet, boring. I couldn't win. That wasn't about you. That was about him needing you insecure. I know that now. But for 10 years, I believed him. I made myself smaller and smaller. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. He still cheated. Jacob took my hand. Sophia, you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. Your passion isn't too much. It's everything. When you talk about buildings, your face lights up. The day you walked into that board meeting and refused to apologize for existing, I knew you were going to change everything. I kissed him, overwhelmed by the difference between being celebrated versus erased. I love you, I said the first time. I'm still figuring out how to do this without fear. But I love you. We'll figure it out together. That's the difference. We're a team. In February, Architectural Digest ran their feature. The article wasn't just about the fellowship, it was about my story. Dumpster diving to running a prestigious firm. Theodore's decade of waiting. Transforming Hartfield architecture. The response was overwhelming. Media wanted interviews. Schools invited me to speak. Clients wanted Hartfield. My Instagram gained 50,000 followers in a week. But visibility brought unwanted attention. Richard called on a Tuesday. I was in a meeting when my phone lit up with his name. I'd never changed his contact. Probably should get therapy about that. I ignored it. He called again, then texted. Saw the Architectural Digest article. Impressive. We should talk. I showed Jacob, who frowned. Block him. I want to know what he wants first. Next message. I made mistakes. I see that now. Maybe we could meet for coffee. Closure. I laughed bitterly. He wants back in now that I'm successful. You're not meeting him. God, no. But I'm going to respond. I typed. Richard, you spent 10 years convincing me I was worthless. You took everything and told me nobody would want a broke, homeless woman. You were wrong about me then and you're irrelevant now. Don't contact me again. Send. It felt amazing. Jacob pulled me close. How do you feel? Free. He doesn't get to rewrite history. He made his choices, and I've moved far beyond them. But Richard wasn't done. He reached out to Emma through LinkedIn, claiming to be a friend. She immediately told me and sent screenshots. Some guy named Richard Foster messaged me, said he was your ex, and wanted to congratulate you. I told him I don't pass messages to my boss from strangers. Was that okay? That was perfect. If he contacts you again, block him. Richard's final attempt came through his lawyer. A letter requesting a meeting to discuss potential business opportunities and reconciliation. Jacob read it with anger. He wants you to invest in his company. He's using your success to fund his failing business. Of course. He spent our marriage taking from me. Though I've got to admire the audacity. I had Victoria draft a response. Miss Hartfield has no interest in any professional or personal relationship with Mr. Richard Foster. Further contact will be considered harassment and will result in legal action. That stopped the calls, but it didn't stop Richard talking. A former friend reached out with a warning. Richard's telling people you stole Theodore's company, manipulated a dying man. He's trying to undermine you. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt pity. Richard was so threatened he needed to create a narrative where I was the villain. Let him talk, I told Jacob. Anyone who knows me knows the truth. The gossip reached Theodore's social circle, resulting in a gallery opening invitation from Patricia, an art dealer close to my uncle. Several people have been saying things. Her note read, I'd like to hear your side. I attended with Jacob. The gallery was filled with architectural photography, including Theodore's buildings. Patricia greeted me warmly. You look just like your uncle when he was young. Same fire in your eyes. I've heard people have questions about the will, about Theodore. Patricia smiled. Darling, those people are jealous gossips. Theodore talked about you constantly in his final years. He was so proud, even when you weren't speaking. He showed me your notebooks once, said you'd outshine him someday. By evening's end, I'd met a dozen of Theodore's closest friends, all sharing stories about how he'd tracked my life from a respectful distance, how he'd planned this inheritance for years, how he'd known I needed to find my own way out. Your ex is spreading rumors because he's threatened, one architect told me bluntly. Theodore always said the measure of character is how people handle another's success. Richard's showing everyone exactly who he is. Driving home, Jacob asked, Do you regret any of it? The marriage? The lost years? I thought about it. Seriously? I regret the time lost. I regret believing his lies. But I don't regret the journey, because it led here. If I hadn't hit rock bottom, I might never have appreciated standing on top. Or I'd be insufferable about it. Actually, I might be insufferable anyway. Jacob laughed. You're not insufferable. You're confident. There's a difference. Theodore would approve. He always said false modesty was just another way of lying. Spring brought new challenges. The Brooklyn shelter neared completion, and Emma's design attracted attention from city planners wanting to replicate it. But success bred scrutiny. Marcus Chun, CEO of a rival firm, started a whisper campaign questioning our methods. He suggested we were exploiting fellows, that our growth was unsustainable, that I was writing Theodore's reputation. Your standard insecure competitor nonsense. I waved it off. Jacob advised me to ignore it. Engaging gives them legitimacy, but I was tired of men underestimating me. When Marcus published an op-ed in a major journal criticizing the fellowship, I responded publicly. My article was titled Building Bridges: Why Architecture Needs New Voices. I laid out the fellowship structure, compensation, mentorship model. I addressed privilege head-on. Marcus Chun inherited his firm from his father. I don't judge that advantage, but I do judge him pulling the ladder up behind him. The question isn't whether programs like Hartfield Fellowship are exploitative. It's whether the industry can evolve beyond nepotism to serve the communities we design for. The article went viral. Schools shared it. Young architects praised it. Marcus looked exactly what he was, a privileged man threatened by change. Theodore's friends rallied. Patricia wrote, praising the fellowship. Other architects followed, creating a groundswell of support that drowned Marcus's criticism. But attention brought something unexpected. A streaming network producer reached out about a documentary on transformative architecture. They wanted to feature the Brooklyn shelter, the fellowship, and my story. This is huge exposure, our marketing director said, but it means opening your personal life to scrutiny. I looked at Jacob. What do you think? I think you'll do whatever your gut tells you. But consider what you're comfortable sharing. Your story is powerful, but personal. That night, we talked it through. If I do this, people will ask about my marriage, about why Theodore, and I didn't speak. I'd have to talk about Richard, which means talking publicly about emotional abuse, Jacob said quietly. I hadn't considered that angle. I don't want to give him that much real estate in my story. He already took 10 years. But as I said it, I realized something. Richard wasn't the story. Theodore was. My resilience was. Richard was just the obstacle I'd overcome. I'll do it, but I control the narrative. They film what I allow. This is architectural journalism with emotional depth, not reality TV. The crew arrived in May. For 2 months, they documented everything. The Brooklyn shelter opening, where Emma gave a speech that made me cry with pride. Fellowship students presenting to real clients. Board meetings with mutual respect instead of power plays. They interviewed Theodore's friends sharing stories. Margaret talked about watching him track my life from afar, the pain of seeing me struggle. And they asked about Richard. In the interview, filmed in Theodore's studio, I kept it simple. I was married to someone who needed me small to feel big. He saw my education as a threat. The divorce devastated me financially, but freed me emotionally. Sometimes, losing everything is gaining yourself back. The interviewer pressed for details, but I smiled and shook my head. The specifics don't matter. What matters is I survived and built something beautiful from the wreckage. That's the only story worth telling. Richard gets to be a footnote, and honestly, even that's generous. The documentary was fast-tracked for the streaming platform's fall lineup. They wanted to capitalize on the buzz around our fellowship program. When it aired in August, just 4 months after filming began, the response was overwhelming. Architecture students reached out, sharing stories of family pressure. Women wrote, thanking me for talking about emotional abuse without sensationalizing it. The fellowship received over 1,000 applications. And Richard called again. Because apparently, the man never learned. I was at dinner with Jacob when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered out of curiosity. Sophia, it's Richard. I froze. Jacob reached across to take my hand. How did you get this number? I saw the documentary. You made me look like a villain. I didn't mention your name once. If you saw yourself in my story, that says more about you than me. It's called introspection. You should try it sometime. People know it was me. Your friends, old neighbors. You're destroying my reputation. I laughed. Richard, I haven't thought about you in months. I don't care about your reputation. I told my truth. And if it makes you uncomfortable, maybe reflect on why. It's honestly impressive how delusional you are. I want a public apology. A statement saying I wasn't abusive, that the divorce was mutual. No, Richard. I stood, walking outside. I'm going to say this once. You spent 10 years making me believe I was worthless. You took everything in our divorce. You mocked my education. And now that I've built something extraordinary, you want to rewrite history? I don't owe you anything. Not my silence, not my comfort, not a single second of my time. You're a footnote in my story. Lose my number. Lose my name. Lose any hope that I'll ever consider you relevant again. I hung up and called Victoria. Richard just demanded a public apology. I need a cease and desist. If he contacts me or anyone associated with me ever again, I'm pursuing legal action. Consider it done. And Sophia, I'm proud of you. Back at the table, Jacob was waiting with my wine and a proud smile. You okay? I'm perfect. He wanted to make me small again, and I refused. That felt amazing. A woman at the next table leaned over. I'm sorry for eavesdropping, but I saw the documentary. Thank you for being honest about your marriage. My daughter's in a relationship like that. Your story might give her courage. I gave her my card. Have her call my office. I'm happy to talk to anyone who needs to hear they're not alone. As we left, Jacob wrapped his arm around me. You're changing lives. Not just through buildings, but through your story. That's Theodore's real legacy. Not the buildings, but the belief that architecture is about people, about creating spaces where lives can transform. The partnership vote happened in October, exactly 1 year after I'd taken over. Jacob had been senior partner, but the board needed to formally approve elevating him to co-CEO alongside me. I'd expected some resistance. What I got was unanimous approval and something unexpected. Before we conclude, board member Patricia Stevens said, "There's another matter. Sophia, the board has received an offer for Hartfield Architecture." I froze. She slid a document across. "Marcus Chen's firm wants to acquire us. He's offering $300 million for full acquisition. His firm has been losing major clients to us, and, following our significant international government contracts this year, he sees acquisition as his only path forward. Given your 51% ownership, the decision is yours. $300 million. I'd have over $150 million personally. Financial security for life." "This is a trap," Jacob said immediately. "Marcus spent months undermining us." "The offer is legitimate," Patricia said. "I suspect he wants to eliminate competition and absorb our methods." I read the terms carefully. Complete acquisition meant Marcus would control everything. The name, the projects, the fellowship program. He could dissolve it all and erase Theodore's legacy. "No," I said without hesitation. "Sophia, that's a lot of money," Patricia said gently. "You should at least consider it." "I don't need to. Theodore didn't leave me this company, so I could sell it to someone who represents everything he fought against." "The answer is no." The board members exchanged glances. Then Patricia smiled. "That's exactly what we hoped you'd say. Theodore included a provision in his will that we weren't allowed to disclose until you'd been CEO for 1 year and faced a major acquisition offer." She pulled out another document. "If you rejected any substantial acquisition offer, you'd receive an additional trust he established. $30 million, unrestricted. For understanding that some legacies can't be bought." I sat back, stunned. He tested me even after death. He wanted to make sure you valued the work over the wealth. Many would have sold. Theodore needed to know you'd choose the mission. Jacob was watching me carefully. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. A year ago, I might have been angry about manipulation. Now, I understood differently. Theodore hadn't been controlling me. He'd been proving to me what I was capable of. I feel like he knew me better than I knew myself. A year ago, I might have sold. But now, this company isn't just Theodore's legacy. It's mine, too. And it's not for sale. The vote to make Jacob co-CEO passed unanimously. As the meeting ended, Patricia pulled me aside. "Theodore left you one more thing." She handed me a small velvet box. "Instructions to give it to you after you pass the acquisition test." Inside was a ring, a simple band with architectural blueprints etched into the metal, and a note in Theodore's handwriting. "Sophia, if you're reading this, you passed my final test. This ring belonged to my wife, your great-aunt Eleanor, whom you never met. She was an architect, too. One of the first women to practice in the 1950s. She faced barriers you can't imagine, but she never compromised her vision. When she died, I promised I'd give this to someone worthy of her legacy. That someone is you. Build bravely, live boldly, and never let anyone make you small again. I'm proud of you. T." I slipped the ring on my finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Theodore had planned everything. That evening, Jacob found me in the studio, looking out at Manhattan with Eleanor's ring catching the light. "Penny for your thoughts?" Theodore orchestrated everything. The inheritance, the board challenges, the acquisition offer. He mapped out tests to prove I was who he believed I could be. Are you angry? No. I'm grateful. He didn't just give me a company. He gave me challenges that forced me to become the architect, the leader, the person I was always meant to be. Without those tests, I might have doubted myself forever. Jacob wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You know what I think. Theodore knew you'd pass every test because you already had something Marcus Chun and people like Richard will never understand." "What's that?" "The ability to value people over profit. To see potential in problems. To build up instead of tear down. That's why I fell in love with you. Not because you're Theodore's heir, but because you see the world as a place worth improving." I love you too. You've been my partner through all of this. Speaking of partnership, Jacob said, his voice nervous. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple and elegant, with a small diamond catching the light. Sophia Hartfield, I'm not doing this because of any test or timeline. I'm doing this because every day with you is better than the day before. And I want a lifetime of days watching you change the world. Will you marry me? I looked at the ring, then at Jacob, then at the studio around us that Theodore had built, hoping I'd return. A year ago, I'd been married to someone who'd wanted to diminish me. Now, I was being proposed to by someone who celebrated me. Yes, I said, tears streaming. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring on beside Eleanor's ring, and they looked perfect together. Old legacy and new beginning. Should we tell people tonight? Actually, Jacob said, pulling out his phone with a grin. I already asked Margaret to prepare champagne. She's been hoping for this since you moved in. We went downstairs to find Margaret beaming, champagne chilling. It's about time. Mr. Theodore would be so happy. He probably planned this too, I said, laughing through tears. Probably has a letter about how Jacob was perfect for me. Actually, Margaret said, heading to Theodore's study, he does. She returned with an envelope addressed to both of us, dated the week before Theodore died. Jacob and Sophia, if you're reading this together, my plan worked better than I hoped. Jacob, you've been like a son. Sophia, you've always been like a daughter. I couldn't imagine better leaders for my company or better partners for each other. Build something beautiful together. And please don't name any children Theodore. That name dies with me. All my love. T. We laughed and cried, toasting a man who'd believed in us when we didn't believe in ourselves. The engagement announcement made waves in the architecture community. Architectural Digest wanted an exclusive. Design magazines wanted photos. Even Theodore's old rivals sent surprisingly kind congratulations. But the biggest response came from Richard. Because of course it did. Victoria called me on a Friday morning in November, her voice tight, with controlled anger. Richard filed a lawsuit. He's claiming you used marital assets to invest in Hartfield architecture. That he's entitled to a portion of your inheritance. I laughed. I was broke when we divorced. He took everything. How could I have invested anything? He's arguing that your architectural knowledge acquired during your marriage, while he supported you financially, constitutes a marital asset that contributed to your current success. It's absurd, but it's designed to be disruptive and expensive to fight. Jacob, listening on speaker, looked furious. He's doing this because she's engaged. This is spite, not legal merit. Exactly. Which is why we're going to destroy him. Sophia, I need evidence from your marriage that shows Richard actively prevented you from working. Emails, texts, anything where he discouraged your career. I thought about those 10 years. I kept journals. Nothing I showed him, but I documented things. His comments about my degree, times he sabotaged job opportunities, ways he isolated me. Perfect. Get them to me today. We're filing a countersuit for emotional distress, defamation, and harassment. Richard's about to learn that targeting you was the worst decision he's ever made. Finding the journals was harder than expected. They'd been in storage, in boxes I hadn't opened since moving to Manhattan. Jacob came with me. As we sorted through boxes, I found the journals buried beneath old textbooks. Listen to this, I said, reading from an entry 5 years into my marriage. Richard told his colleague at dinner that my architecture degree was a hobby. Cute but useless. When I tried to correct him, he laughed and said I was too sensitive. Later, he told me I'd embarrassed him. I apologized. God, Jacob, I apologize for existing. Jacob's jaw was tight. He systematically destroyed your confidence. He tried to, but he didn't succeed. I'm still here, and he's the one filing frivolous lawsuits. The journals painted a devastating picture, 10 years of emotional manipulation documented in my own handwriting. Richard criticizing my appearance, my intelligence, my dreams. Richard losing my license exam registration. Richard scheduling trips during interviews I'd arranged. Richard telling me repeatedly that nobody else would love me. Victoria reviewed. Additional funding from Hartfield's profits. We began designing and building libraries, community centers, and public spaces across the country. Each incorporated sustainable design, local artists, and community input. Architecture as collaboration. Emma led the design for the Philadelphia Community Library, her first project as lead architect. I attended the opening, watching her explain her vision to the press. Architecture saved my life, Emma told reporters. Not just as a career, but as proof that I could build something meaningful. Sophia Hartfield taught me that buildings are more than structures. They're promises that better futures are possible. I found Emma afterward, hugging her tightly. Theodore would have loved this. Would have loved you. I know, because you loved me enough for both of you. Thank you for seeing potential when I couldn't. Hartfield architecture grew steadily over the next few years. Not chasing prestige, but pursuing projects that aligned with our values. We designed schools in underserved communities, affordable housing that didn't sacrifice beauty, public spaces that brought people together. We won awards. But more importantly, we changed lives. Richard faded into obscurity. His business failing, his reputation destroyed by his own actions, and multiple women who came forward with similar stories. I heard about it through former acquaintances and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just complete indifference. He'd become what he'd always been: irrelevant. 5 years after taking over Hartfield, I was invited to give the commencement address at my architecture school. I stood at the podium, looking at graduates who reminded me of the person I'd been once. When I graduated, I had a degree, a dream, and absolute certainty about my future. Within a week, I'd abandoned all of it for a man who needed me small. For 10 years, I disappeared into a life that wasn't mine. But here's what I learned. You can't actually lose yourself. You can misplace yourself temporarily, but your essential self remains, waiting for you to remember. When I finally escaped that marriage, I had nothing. No money, no home, no confidence. But I had my education, my passion, and a great uncle who believed I was worth waiting for. Some of you will take straightforward paths. Others will detour through darkness first. Both journeys are valid. What matters is remembering this. You are architects. You see potential in empty spaces. You understand that foundations must be strong before buildings can rise. Apply that same vision to your own lives. Build yourself carefully, honestly, courageously. And when life tries to tear you down, remember you're trained to reconstruct from ruins. The applause was thunderous. Resilience. And the power of refusing to stay small when the world tries to diminish you. That evening, I returned to the estate where this chapter began. Jacob was in the studio, working on sketches for a Detroit children's museum. Margaret had dinner waiting. I climbed to the rooftop garden where Theodore had imagined my homecoming. The city stretched below, full of buildings designed by people with dreams and determination. I thought about the woman who'd climbed out of that dumpster 18 months ago, believing she'd lost everything. I wished I could tell her what was coming. But more than that, I wished I could tell her the most important thing. She was already everything she needed to be. She just needed time and space to remember it. My phone buzzed. Emma, just landed the commission for the San Francisco Community Center. Your blueprint is changing the country. Thank you for believing in me. I smiled, typing back. Thank you for proving Theodore was right about potential. You're going to outshine us all someday. Jacob joined me on the rooftop. What are you thinking about? Everything. Where I was, where I am, where we're going next. And where are we going? I turned to face him, this man who'd chosen to build alongside me. Wherever we design next. Together. He agreed. And in that word was everything. Partnership, trust, love, and the understanding that the best architecture, whether buildings or lives, is created by people who refuse to diminish each other's light. Theodore had given me more than money or property. He'd given me the gift of hitting rock bottom hard enough to understand what solid ground felt like. He'd proven that sometimes the people who love us most let us struggle because they believe we're strong enough to save ourselves. And I had. I'd saved myself, built myself back stronger, and created a legacy that had nothing to do with inheriting success and everything to do with becoming exactly who I was always meant to be. I wasn't Theodore's prodigy anymore. I wasn't Richard's victim. I wasn't even just Sophia Hartfield, CEO. I was an architect, not just of buildings, but of second chances, of possibility, of futures built on foundations of belief that everyone deserves space to grow into their best selves. And that was the inheritance that really mattered. Call to action. So, what do you think? Have you ever had a moment where you realized someone was trying to keep you small, and you finally found the courage to break free and build something new? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Let's talk about it.